It's the TXWaterpolo Podcast. I'm James Smith in Austin, and he's Joe, and he is in San Antonio, finally. Hi, Joe.
James, how are you doing?
Joe, man, we just talked about something that's so fun, and we can't mention it yet. I can't tell you how much I want to talk about that because it's so cool.
We'll talk about it in a couple of weeks. So.
I know. The stuff that we talk about off the air is so fun. But anyway, we'll get to that. Yeah, a bit of sort of schedule making is, again, we're going to take the next couple of weeks off in this format. I think we're going to have some interviews that we'll push out there by week, and we'll touch base with everybody about that. But I'm leaving. I'm going out of town. It's my wife's 50th birthday. We're going all over the place, all the way up to Delaware. So yeah, I'm gone. I'm not gonna, and I don't even think I'm gonna bring my mic with me.
That's okay. Yeah, but you're gonna bring your computer so you can edit my interviews that are gonna happen in the next couple of weeks.
That's true. I'm not gonna edit them well, but I am gonna edit them. Yeah, the quality is gonna suffer because I will be on vacation.
That's okay. This is not the highest quality anyway, James.
What are you talking about?
That's fine.
Didn't we win an Emmy or something? I don't think so. Yeah. No. I never get tired of telling people how this is.
Different life.
Not a good podcast. Not a good podcast. Yeah. All right. Biggest news perhaps so far is UIL announcing what's going on this fall for football and volleyball in particular, but also other sports. And so, you correct me if I'm wrong. It's like not starting until September 7th. The championships, and this is tentative, right? I mean, and then championships pushed off to December. And then some other details too, but this doesn't necessarily have a direct effect on water polo. Kind of sort of does, but it's really more about just where we are as far as sports are concerned all throughout the state at the high school level.
Yeah, so things are being pushed off a little bit and delayed and postponed. I don't think anything's been canceled, which is great. But yeah, so the first practices of the fall season for the team sports, which are volleyball and football, are going to be the week of. And then normally their championships are in November and December. So now their championships are going to be December, January.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. And it covers tennis, cross country, volleyball, football. Yeah, that's it. And then, but there's also other UIL activities such as, band and marching band and those type of things as well, which are also being kind of delayed until September 7th. Yeah. Before we started talking, Joe schooled me on the differences between all of these conference levels. I didn't even realize 6A was an invention in like 2014. I think you said that. Anyway, that escaped me. But anyhow, all right. So, and then just even more recently, it was something to the effect like on August 3rd, and this I think has something more to do with football than anything else. But they're going to expand the number of hours that people can train. And I think you might have an opinion about just like this. This seems like guidance more than it's some sort of mandate, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. So the UIL does provide guidance to the school districts, and then the school districts can interpret what the UIL says, and then make their own decisions. So, but I believe that the UIL is going to allow the sport, like the strength and conditioning camps and the sport specific training throughout until in-person instruction starts. So, which in this case would be up to like I guess September 4th for like football and volleyball.
I don't know if you wanted to talk about anything else related to UIL stuff. We're going to talk later about CIF in California. Well, actually in a couple minutes here, but it's all. They're not synchronized in the sense that the water polo seasons for sure are different for now, but the CIF will often take the lead in certain ways. I'm sure the UIL would dispute that, but at least they're indicating something. So anyway, we'll get to them in a second. And before then, Austin College. I know this for a fact because I got two assistant coaches who are both student athletes there, and they're leaving by August 17, I think. So they are going back to school, but the men's season has been postponed or suspended. So what's the current status and who's been driving that process?
I don't know who's been driving it, but I mean, that's kind of like that started with the Ivy Leagues a couple weeks ago, where the Ivy League decided to postpone their season spring for all their fall sports, and water polo included. I believe the CWPA has also postponed their men's season yet at the spring or at some later date. And then there's been some schools in California that have done it too. I don't think there hasn't been a specific conference that has done it, but there has been some schools like, kind of Pomona Pitzer and Whittier have postponed their season. So whoever's playing for men's water polo later in the year, there's going to be other teams to play.
Right.
It's just now the interesting dynamic there is, all right, well, if half the teams are playing in the spring, the other half are playing in the fall, when is the NCAA championship?
Right. Yeah. Oh,
and that's just or are the other schools going to also be pushed to the spring as well? So I mean, there's a lot of kind of moving parts, and it changes almost daily.
Can you imagine the men's and women's playing at the same time in the spring? I mean, it could happen. It's just the logistics involved would be amazing.
That is going to be challenging for the the coaches, especially the coaches that are like there's one head coach for men and women.
Yeah, exactly.
And they may not even have assistant coaches. So
well, we were talking about Oxford College and Mark and Mark's assistant Jeff Passwater and he and I mean theoretically they would just split the teams. I don't know if that for a fact, but it's just some that we can speculate on. But at least they're lucky to have an assistant.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a challenge. But I mean, we hope that this is all just a 1-year type delay, and obviously kind of playing a full season is better than what happened to the spring sports this past school year.
Yeah.
Which were just kind of cut off kind of halfway through their season, and no one wants to see that again. Yeah. And that's my fear as far as kind of locally here for the UIL in high school. Well, we have our fall sports that have been postponed. Are the winter sports going to be postponed?
Yeah, exactly.
And then is swimming going to be postponed to the spring? Because if swimming's postponed to the spring, then that's going to put a significant dent into the high school water polo season. And then the high school water polo season, they may have to move back to May, June or something.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So, which is fine. I mean, I think we've all just talked about it. Just be responsible, Yeah. So, and this is everybody. I mean, these are first world problems we're talking about, right? So, there's a lot of people are dealing with a lot worse things out there. So, and this is what we have to do, and just kind of adjust and adapt as we move forward.
If you go to Harvard, you got to pay $50,000 and you can sit at home. Like you can't go to campus. I mean, that's how different things are. Exactly. Yeah, and we reported on Total Water Polo before when the season was canceled by SCIAC, and so there's a couple schools that will often take the lead in that, but I suspect that SCIAC will follow. I don't have any information on that at all, but that's my suspicion. So yeah, they would just add themselves to the group. So yeah, that's disappointing, but at the same time, the CIF has come down with even more severe restrictions. They're not. I mean, their season for water polo is essentially in a couple of weeks is when it would normally start for training. But now they're talking, both boys and girls would be state championships would be in March, or regional championships rather, district championships. Yeah. So they're changing everything.
So that's what it looks like. So if you look at what the CIF, and for those that don't know, the CIF is basically the California version of our UIL.
Yeah.
Basically all the fall sports are pretty much starting in December for practices and competitions. So basically they took the winter sports and they either made them a fall sport or a spring sport. Right. So all the fall sports now are going to be going from December to March, and then the spring sports are going from March till June. Yeah. So there will be a little kind of like, I saw it's kind of interesting that water polo championships are going to be late March, but the first swim meet can happen in early March.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a little overlap there. So, I mean, but that's, again, people have to adjust and adapt. So, but yeah, I mean, this is what people are going to have to do kind of moving forward. So it's just kind of very interesting on how they're like the difference between what the CIF did to what the UIL did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a pretty severe change. By the way, in California, at least, there's a little more sort of separation between swim and polo. So the overlap, of course, it's going to catch up a few people, and they'll have to make decisions. But in general, based on my experience there, then there are those who are dedicated to water polo, basically all year long. So that shouldn't be as big a problem. But still, this schedule, as you just said, is very compacted and obviously, hopefully, a one-time thing.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Did you see that one of the sports offered by the CIF is skiing and snowboarding? We got to get in on that.
Yeah. But the bigger thing is.
Oh, yeah, that's not a big thing. Okay.
The bigger thing is how is that going to affect the National Junior Olympics now?
Yeah, so that's something that we can talk about next, because we're going to cover that, and then there are other events that are on the calendar that may be shifted, may not be shifted, but we'll talk about that and a little bit more when we come back.
All of TX Water Polo is brought to you advertising free, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're asking for your help. Show your support by going to TXWaterpolo.com/give, so we can keep covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, this is Brenda Villa, 4-time Olympic medalist, and whenever I want to hear about Texas water polo, I tune into the TX Waterpolo Podcast.
James, Joe, back with you. We're going to move on to more Texas news, really. There are more clubs getting back in the pool. A big one, actually, really, up in North Texas. But we just wanted to go over them just real quick about the changes and who's in and who's out, as far as we know. And by the way, if you are back in practicing, then let us know. pod@txwaterpolo.com. But who is the newest addition? And actually, you have an intimate knowledge of one of the teams.
I don't know about that, but it's 13. So I have a couple development teams in North Texas, so they're hopefully going to get back in the water this upcoming Monday on July 27th. That's the Lone Star and Mavericks groups. We were hoping to get back in July 13th and July 6th, but that was pushed back. But we've been told for sure that we're hopefully going to be getting in here July 27th. I'm crossing my fingers. And then Thunders, I think, has started practice here in July, which is one of the bigger clubs up in North Texas. And also Cowtown started back in late June.
So Thunder is practicing some interesting places. Where are those?
Like, that's just, I think both Thunder and Cowtown are kind of using the city or the neighborhood HOA pools.
What's the theme park? Isn't there one that the Thunder is practicing there?
Yeah, they are practicing at Hawaiian Falls.
Hawaiian Falls, that's the one. Yeah.
So they are using the wave pool, before they open at 10 o'clock. So I think they're there from 8:30 or 8 to 9:30 or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know. They should just turn on the wave machine and just practice like that. That's like when we used to play in the ocean. Absolutely.
Yeah, then you get a whole lot less done in there, and I'm sure it's not cheap what they're charging. So they want to maximize that pool time. So
I know. There's one of those in I think it's in Pflugerville up around Rock where we practice. But yeah, they had no interest in water polo. But anyway, we're lucky enough to be in the pool. Your club is getting back in. Your pool is a community or a district pool, correct?
School district pool, yeah.
So go over, because you have insights into that kind of thing more than I think anybody. It's one thing to say, all these teams, why don't they just hop back on the pools? Well, my team has been back in since May 18, and the way that our pool is run is just simply different than other municipal or whatever community pools. And so what are the differences, right? Finding a private place is the quote easiest, but what other considerations do teams have to make?
So there's three types of pools. There's a private pool, kind of a public pool, which is kind of like a city pool, and also a school district type pool. So what I found just talking to the different clubs, the private pools are they're easier to access.
Right.
Just because there's a little bit less kind of concern about the overall, I hate to say less concern about the safety guidelines. The clubs are doing their social distancing, and they're not doing contact. They're doing all the temperature and the checking. So that's what you're doing as well. It just seems that those are a little bit more easier to access, and they're a little bit more flexible on the ability to use the pools. And then there's the city pools like yourself that, there are some city pools that have been shut down completely.
Right.
Since kind of since April. Then there's yours that you were you at Aquatex were the last group to stop practicing and the first group to practice.
I think
so. Obviously, right. Aquatex is kind of using a facility where your city is allowing you to do a little bit more than other cities are.
Yeah.
But from what I gather for school districts have been very, very keen about not letting people use their facilities in general, not just swim teams or water polo teams, but any facility.
Right.
So, and that's, because they get mandates not just from the city and the county and the state, but they also get mandates from the TEA and the UIL.
Yeah. And they're political bodies. I mean, I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, that's genuinely the case, is that they have pressures that other organizations might not. And then clearly there are differences between those kinds of bodies. Like they have, they can deal with things differently. So it's really interesting.
No, yeah. So, I mean, there are more rules in place, and then, there are guidelines that are put down by the UIL and TA, and then each school district can then determine how they interpret those guidelines. And there have been some school districts that have let clubs use their facilities, but they're not very many.
Right.
And then and so I'm very, very fortunate to be able to have my developmental club up in North Texas, be able to start practicing again, which is great. But like, it's kind of like, look at what happened in Round Rock, right? You guys have a pool that has been opened more than any other pool that I know of. But your school district was the first school district in the area to say that they were going to do at-home learning.
That's right. Yeah.
So, there's just two different groups there.
Two different groups. What are you going to do for practice? I'm curious. Like you're the one who told me about how, playing ultimate essentially. Or what are your plans?
I mean, it's going to be.
Or what are your restrictions?
The restrictions, we're just basically going to use the restriction that we were planning on for July 6th and July 13th is, we're going to have groups of about 12 to 15.
Okay.
And we're going to have one or two coaches kind of per group. And it's going to be basically about, like, the kids have to get there at 1:50 that are meeting up in the stands, and everybody's is 6 feet apart. They have to come in their suit. They have to leave in their suit.
Yep.
There's no using the locker rooms, only using the bathrooms for emergencies. So everybody meets, and then we'll get in the water and do, like water polo type conditioning, not really swimming, but water polo conditioning, and then we'll do passing, and then we'll do shooting, all staying, the social distancing.
Right.
And then that'll cover about an hour and 15 minutes, because we're going to have to be out of the pool by about 3:30, because all the kids have to be out the door by 3:45 to allow the next group to come in. So.
Got it. Yeah, it's been so fascinating to see. And by the way, there's a bunch of teams in California that are getting back in the pool all throughout the country, Ohio, elsewhere. In fact, Ohio might even have. I thought I heard somebody say that they were actually allowing body contact, which is unique because we're not allowed to do that. But
again, it's just like here, every city and school district and county are different.
Yep.
Every state's different too. So
it's pretty cool.
And it's hard to keep track of, who's playing and who's not, and who can and who won't. I mean, it's like, I know the UIL had a rule starting July 13th that, that the sports specific training can start doing offense versus defense.
Okay.
So, but what does that mean? Does that mean that they can do kind of a full-blown scrimmage? Is it one-on-one drills? Now, that's probably for more football than anything else. But how does that transfer you get out of the pool? Can we allow contact now? Who knows? But then even if you are allowed to do contact, is that something that your club is ready to do yet?
Yeah, exactly. It's because I suspect that if I really wanted to, I could. But
then are you going to lose athletes and parents who they're okay with their kids doing kind of what you're doing right now, but once you cross that line, I don't know if I want my kid to do that.
I'm not comfortable about it myself, because if I read the data, like it's the chances of these kids getting sick in a meaningful way are pretty low. But if they do, it's not good. It's like I'm not interested in that. So yeah, we're sticking to the rules until we are told otherwise, So yeah,
exactly. So it's all up there. So
yeah. Okay, just a couple. So Cowtown has been back in the pool since late June, I think. We were just talking about clubs around the state. My friends at Longhorn, they're completely shut down because UT is there's just nothing going on in that pool as far as my understanding. Southside was in their pool, then had to leave, and then are back, or back at a different location. I'm unclear about that.
I think they're back, and then I think again their pool is run by the city. I think they got shut down again. I'm not sure if they're back in yet.
Okay. So yeah, but we did know that they were.
And I say that they got shut down. I think it's more that the whole facility got shut down.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say they got kicked out. It's not really the right way to put it. It's the facility was closed, so they couldn't practice anymore. So
exactly. And then Triumph is practicing there. Storm, I think, is starting to practice this week again.
Okay.
And then I think Cy-Fair Water Polo Club is using some HOA pools and some neighborhood pools, and they're going to start practicing here in the next week or so.
Great.
And then the Viper Engines are still out there kind of searching kind of a little bit, so I don't think they're practicing just yet. But yeah, there's a ton of water polo going on in Houston, so it's good.
Thankfully. Okay, good news. So that translates a little bit into what we're, the calendar upcoming for USA Water Polo events is obviously very fluid. But as of right now, Welcome to Texas Shootout is on the calendar, and there's no change to that.
As of right now, no. We are moving forward. I know I'm talking to a lot of clubs that are really excited about going to that event. So it is Labor Day weekend in San Antonio. We're hoping that, again, everything changes kind of daily. We're hoping that we get the approval to have the event, and we're going to be hopefully one of the first events that is played nationwide.
Right. It's so weird because, again, you and I have spoken, and my fixation is on body contact, and which is basically not allowed. And so it's just so strange to think that that's going to just turn around, like that whichever entity oversees the facility or the event or whatever is going to say, yes, I mean, full on scrimmage, full on body contact, offense, defense. And then even if they did do that, or that when they do that, that means, are you going to be able to train that way up until the point of the tournament, or are you just going to have to train like we have been and then just jump in and do your best?
I know those are the questions that are going to be answered here in the next couple of weeks, but you go out there, and you see basketball tournaments, you see soccer tournaments.
That's true.
You see softball tournaments that are going on actively with and without masks being worn. I'm not saying that that's what we want to do as water polo right now, but these are the conversations that are going on behind the scenes. And I hope that we can get back in the water, because I think it would be good for the kids to have an event to look forward to and train
for sure.
But again, I only want to do that event if it's going to be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. and it's safe and responsible. So.
Oh, my guys are dying to play in that. So am I. Their coaches want them to go too. So, oh gosh, I hope it still happens. JO's also is up in the air. I mean, it's on the calendar still, so it hasn't changed. But just given what happened with CIF, it seems to me that there's probably going to have to be some changes in the way that that's held. Again, I have no evidence of that. I'm just saying. But the CIF change is pretty big. Like, their season's going to be starting essentially in December, when JO's for 18 and unders was supposed to be. So what do you know about that, if anything?
I don't know anything, so it's pure speculation. Yeah. Obviously, the CIF stuff only came down yesterday, so right. I'm sure there's conversations that are going on in the home office right now, and I'm sure it'll expand to coaches, clubs, and people across the country, and to see what everybody wants and does. And I thought it was pretty outside the box thinking to postpone JOs to the Thanksgiving week and the Christmas. I thought that was great. Now, obviously, if the CIF boys and girls seasons are going to be starting from December to March, it might be tough to have an 18 and 16 and under divisions being played during Christmas break.
Right.
So so that's pure speculation. There can always be exemptions, for clubs and stuff like that happen, but they can do a lot of different things. They can move the 18, 16s to Thanksgiving week, or they can flip-flop the events. Yeah. They can eventually maybe just postpone the events, or, there's a lot of things that can happen, so, and I don't think anything's off the table right now. So.
Yeah. Another point is that, again, access to facilities, right? So, if these schools, and out there, they're some are school district, but they're also just ones that are on campuses, individual high school campuses, and
college campuses that are not very accessible right now either.
Exactly. And so even if and hopefully JO's goes on as planned, like our teams in California in particular are going to be able to train beforehand. So it's so much stuff that's up in here.
So it's access to not just the facilities to actually have the event. It's also access, again, for, as you were just mentioning, to all of those clubs that are training.
Yeah, to train.
It's the same thing that we have to talk about for the Welcome to Texas Shootout.
Yeah.
Do we have access to have the event? And then do our teams actually training accordingly to be able to prepare properly kind of for the event.
Right.
These are all questions that are to be determined.
To be determined. All right. We're going to come back. We're going to have, I'm going to put this out there. We're hoping to have a conversation with Kaitlin Kelley, who's the head coach at St. Agnes and who's a recent addition to our ODP staff. But one of the things that's interesting about that is that I think you have more details on efforts to allow for those teams that aren't going to compete under UIL. And again, for those who don't understand, maybe from out of the state, UIL is public schools with two exceptions. Which is a funny story in and itself. But every other, parochial school and others have to compete in these two other leagues, TAPS and SPS, and that's where St. Agnes and St. Mark's reside. And there's, I guess, a little more movement, if I'm not correct, or if I'm correct about their competition.
I think that, I don't know if there's, again, everything is kind of fluid now, but our goal is to specifically have a TXWaterpolo sponsored a parochial private school and homeschool championship in the fall of 2021.
Okay.
So therefore, those schools can still play in the tournaments that happen in the fall of 2021 against UIL teams. But once everybody starts breaking out to their district play and they go into their playoffs, that there will still be a different track for those teams to continue to play and have a championship to play for. And then the hope is over 3, 4, 5 years that eventually we have enough teams that are in there that TAPS can break off. TAPS is the Texas Association of Private and Parochial Schools that, that Kaitlin's team at St. Agnes is part of, that eventually we get like a handful of those boys and girls teams to then break off and they can have their own state championship. And then we do this, the same thing for SBC, which is where St. Mark's is part of.
Yes.
That, they break off and then they have their own state championship. And then we build up the homeschool teams. So we just don't have, the 1 or 2 teams that are out there right now. We have, multiple homeschool teams around the state, and then they can have a Texas State homeschool championship.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
So everybody will have a championship to play in, so everybody can play at the beginning of the season together. Then the second half of the season is going to be kind of within your own little group. So that's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, that's going to be really cool. I hope that we can pull that off somehow. And I'll talk with Kaitlin about that. Again, I was hoping to line that up either today or tomorrow. And she can talk about what's going to happen with her team. I mean, again, it's a very successful program that's been competitive in TXWaterpolo for ages. And suddenly they're without, they're not going to be able to compete for a state championship under UIL rules. So it's going to be very interesting to know what she says about her upcoming seasons. And we'll be back with that right after this.
Hi, this is Natalie Benson, and you are listening to a podcast about water polo in Texas.
She was a 1999 TXWaterpolo Most Valuable Player. She was the MVP at Iona for 2 years. She was the MAC Offensive Player of the Year for 2 years as well. Although we have to go over that. Maybe Kaitlin is so modest that she doesn't remember whether it's one or both years. And now she's the head coach at St. Agnes Academy and has been coaching at Viper Pigeon, I think on and off. We're going to go into that. But here she is, Kaitlin Kelley.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I love it. We're not going to show the video here, but she's in her car. I actually don't look too bad. I just got a haircut, but we're just doing audio because I have a face for radio. So there you go. So we wanted to talk to you, obviously, because you've had a bunch of success at St. Agnes and elsewhere, but you have an interesting story as a Texas player. So, but let me go first into this. Like, what are the plans for St. Agnes this fall that you can share with everybody?
In terms of going back to school,
right.
So I think we're sort of in the same limbo as everybody else. Our administrators are diligently working every single day and making new plans with the moving target every single day. Our plan is, their full desire, I think, is to go start in a hybrid model on August 17th, where we have kind of like a half and half thing with our students on campus. Mm-hmm. But again, nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen. So we'll be in school starting August 17th. The students will, whether or not that's remotely or in person is to be determined. And then for athletics, it's sort of falling along the same line. So TAPS has released all of their guidelines, and basically we'll start athletics in September, essentially. August will be considered kind of like an off-season summer rules program, I guess. But again, that's also a moving target. We just got an email yesterday saying they would update us again, since UIL just updated yesterday.
Right, so exactly. Yep.
Just update after update.
Yeah, it's Wednesday that we're having a conversation. The UIL just came out with a decision just a while ago. What does all of that mean for you personally, in the sense that, you know, you're on campus, you're a teacher, you're a coach, so on? Like, how does that affect what you're doing on campus, so to speak?
So I guess I don't really have a great answer for that, because, you know, it's kind of a new normal. So I know we are, like I said, working diligently to make sure that the curriculum is in place and that our students are getting the best education that they can and what they expect from St. Agnes. So we're kind of just rolling with all of the punches, really. And, you know, for athletics, I don't really know what it's going to look like. I know we're focusing on our fall sports right now. So I just actually got the job of the associate athletic director at St. Agnes.
Oh, congratulations.
So thanks. I'm in a new role there. So I'm also kind of seeing the inside out of all of our athletics right now. So that's kind of where our focus is fall athletics and how we're going to make those happen. So our day-to-day is right now just meetings and updates, and hopefully we'll be, you know, rolling out our curriculums on August 17th.
So athletically, just remind everybody, where do you practice?
We practice, we rent space from the Jesuit, from Strict Jesuit next door.
Okay.
So,
and I wanted to know that because that's a private institution, it's a private pool. Are there any plans whatsoever in any form, whether it's club, high school, whatever, to get into that pool, as far as you know?
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
I have not heard any updates about access, practices beginning, things like that. So, as you know, Jesuit is a UIL school, so they fall under UIL rules as well. So
it's a double-edged sword, right?
Right. Right.
Years ago, that's one of the most interesting stories of all of Texas high school sports, in my opinion. It's like, well, there's a private school. Why is it part of UIL? It's like because they found the legislators to actually change the directives from the UIL. Anyway, they're very funny. So okay. So let's move ahead. So what is your understanding as of now, and we're a long way away, but what does it look like for you and St. Agnes water polo in the fall of 2021 when the sport does become a UIL sport?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. We're going to have a team regardless. Our athletic department in our school is super supportive of athletics. We have St. Agnes has a long history of water polo. Women, we've been around since the 80s, maybe even a little sooner. The numbers or the dates are a little bit blurry, but we will still have a team who we're going to play, TBD. I know I've spoken with Joe, and he is adamant about getting a private school or private and parochial school kind of league going. We were supposed to present at the TAPS conference this summer about it, and Scott Slay was going to be there as well to try to get it going, and the TAPS conference got canceled. So I think we had to pump the brakes a little bit on that piece of it, but the goal, I think, is to have a couple of teams, if not more, I mean, as many as possible, private school teams playing in the fall, so that we'll have somebody to play once UIL kind of gets into their championship season. But we will still continue playing as many public schools that will play us any tournaments that we can go to. You know, we'll travel if assuming we're allowed to travel and that all of these restrictions are lifted.
Of course, right.
I like to participate in competitive tournaments. I would rather play 100 really competitive games and lose them by a goal than win 100 games by 10 goals, you know. So wherever the competition is where you will find us, I think.
How about a trip to Northern California during the fall?
Possibly, you know, potentially. Like we are open. We usually travel to Florida. Actually, I take my girls to Florida.
Better choice.
Yeah, well, it's just that flex weekend where UIL State Swimming is happening. We usually travel and go to this tournament in Orlando, and it's like we call it our dust off tournament, and it's kind of like, you know, we just kind of get a feel for what's going on, and it's become a little tradition. So I mean, we might have to obviously adjust now that it's moving to the fall, but we'll see.
That's great. Yeah, I forgot about that. And, you know, I'm always encouraged by teams that get out of the state. Not, you know, Texas is huge, so there's lots of opportunities to play here, but it's always good to go see, like, how is this game played elsewhere? So, yeah. And Florida is feisty, so you probably come up against some pretty feisty players there. So, all right.
We do, yeah.
Let's now go backward. So, I don't typically like to start the conversation this way. There's a lot of interviews that go like, what's your background? But it would be interesting to know, how'd you start? You know, because you've become a successful coach, you had a successful career. How did it all start?
So I grew up in San Antonio. I was a swimmer. I was club swimming for, you know, from an early age. And when I was in middle school, 7th grade-ish, 8th grade-ish, my club swim coach, Mark Ellie, he's from Canada, was a water polo guy.
Joe and I spoke about him in detail.
Yeah, so he actually, in between our short course and long course seasons, one time just dropped in some balls, made some goals out of PVC pipe. And I mean, we still had the flags back then, you know, the blue and the white flag, and we didn't know what we were doing. We were just a bunch of swimmers swimming, chasing after a ball. And but he kind of taught us the basics. And then we went to a random tournament at A&M, and Joe and I actually talked about this. He was hosting it. It was a club tournament that had some college teams and some club teams, and we all went not knowing what we were doing, knowing that we were just a bunch of fast swimmers, and we ranged in ages, and we ended up winning the tournament. And we had a great time. I fell in love with it at that point. So that was when I kind of shifted from a swimming mindset to a water polo mindset, I think.
So winning that tournament actually changed your mind about the sport.
Well, yeah, it just gave me I'd been swimming for so long, and I was okay. I mean, I'm definitely not a superstar swimmer by any stretch of the imagination. I used to have ideas of grandeur when I was littler, but it gave me a purpose for swimming, and I just fell in love with it. And it was fun. It was competitive, and I think leveled up my swimming career. And then we found out at the end of my 8th grade year that we were moving to Houston. And my dad got a job, and we left. And my sister and I told my dad and my mom that the only way that we would move with them is that if we were able to move to a school that had water polo, because we knew that Houston had water polo. And so luckily they agreed. And when we moved up here, they drove around the city and met with coaches, and they met with a bunch of people, and they really loved John Webb. And that's how we ended up moving into the Cy Creek subdivisions, the area. That's where we landed. So
yeah, you didn't choose poorly. Like, you found a program that was going to have a lot of success. Yeah, that's actually wow. That's better parenting than I'm doing myself right now. So yeah, that's really super interesting. And I wanted to sort of get right into that because again, you had a lot of success at Cy Creek. You won, as far as I can see, 2 state championships, two, 1998, 1999, and you were MVP of the 1999 season. I have a question, which is, you've been around the game in Texas for quite some time. What is it that you have observed that has changed, improved, gotten worse since 1999 up until just this last spring?
I mean, there's certainly more growth. There's more teams. I think there's a more diverse level of playing, I guess. Back then, there was really strong teams, like powerhouse teams, but there weren't as many of them. I think one of the things that shocked me the most, quite honestly, when I started coaching, when I kind of got back into it, was going to Dallas for the first time and seeing some of the competitive Dallas teams. Because when I was playing, Dallas water polo really didn't exist in a way that it does now. Like, it wasn't as competitive, and I was really pleasantly surprised, and also, not annoyed, but okay, this is where we need to be coming. This is, that's when I started going to Dallas every year. So, I was pleased with that. So, I think beyond that, there's obviously just the sport has grown a lot. I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't grown more, to be quite honest. I think the UIL push hopefully will help, but I mean, they've been talking about UIL water polo since I was in high school, probably since before that, quite honestly. So I kind of was in the corner of okay, it's never going to happen. They've been talking about this for 20 plus years, and So hopefully now that will push it towards even more growth. But I would say that's the primary thing that I noticed.
Why do you think it hasn't grown?
Level. You know what? I don't know, quite honestly. I think there weren't as many clubs back then. There are more now. So maybe there's more opportunity to play. I think our younger kiddos are getting in there and playing more, which is fun. So I think more targeted youth growth is probably where we need to focus. Get them in early and make them love it, so they don't have to wait till high school like most of us did that are my age.
Can you even imagine the sport being UIL? Because it just, TISCA's done a very good job, and I'm frankly proud to be associated with it because it started girls water polo about 20 years before California did. And it has its ups and downs. Obviously, there's been, some disputes amongst the community and so on. But TISCA's actually done a quite good. It's done a good enough job with high school water polo in Texas that a lot of people, in fact, Joe was just on a podcast with a couple guys in Missouri. They were still confused that this is currently a club sport. It's not a sanctioned sport. And so I wonder if you can even imagine what it would be like, if it were a UIL sport back in your day.
No, I mean, I think we would have garnered a little more respect. I remember when we were my senior year, our boys and girls teams won state, and right. We of course were over the moon and really excited and thought it was this gigantic accomplishment. And it's state championship, which it is obviously, but you could have fooled anybody at Side Creek. They weren't super impressed, it wasn't football, it wasn't basketball, it wasn't baseball, so it was what even is water polo, So of course we got some accolades and things from the school, but so I imagine it's going to just give it a little more clout, for the kids, which I think is great. They deserve the respect because it is hard, and they work really, really hard. And, anybody who tries it knows that it's not easy. So
you just give me your impressions, because we've been talking to people about the history of the game here in the state, and I've been told by multiple athletes, multiple coaches that, let's say, the state championship match in, let's say, 1986 was just as big and exciting as it has been in the last 5 to 6 years. I wonder if that's your recollection as well.
Yeah, I mean, it felt huge. I remember when we would play Clear Lake back in the day, because they were one of the powerhouses when I was first in high school when I was younger, and they had this guy that would play a trombone in the middle of every quarter and in the middle of every timeout, and they would bang on pots and pans, and I still can hear the sound in my head. I mean, it was this just, so it was definitely a hyped up situation. And that was when state was in Corpus Christi at the brand new Corpus Christi pool, or even it was at A&M my senior year. So it felt really big, and that pool was really new. So, I mean, certainly there was, the same energy around it. Fans are fans and parents are parents. So
that's great. Yeah, because I wasn't around, so it's not something that I know about. So I'm very curious about that. So again, state champion, MVP. So then Iona was next, but maybe share a little bit about how that decision making went, who recruited you and so on.
Yeah, so my senior year, I started looking at colleges, obviously, and this was before technology, so we were literally writing letters and having phone calls on landlines and things. So the recruiting process was much different. But John Webb was really the one who encouraged me to pursue collegiate water polo. I had thought about it, but I also was not I wasn't quite sure that I was good enough to go and play in college, quite honestly. So I was a little timid about that, but he really pushed me into the recruiting process. And once I started, talking with coaches and stuff, and going on trips and things, I landed at Iona just because it felt like I ended up really liking it on my recruiting trip. I liked the people I was with. I ended up going on a recruiting trip with a girl who ended up being the goalie there as well. And so we both, committed together. And so it just felt right when I went there. It was small enough, that it wasn't overwhelming, but it was close to the city and fun and, kind of adventure. But it was John Webb was the one who pushed me into the recruiting process. So,
well, let's back up a little bit, because I don't know John Webb. Tell us a little bit about your experience with him and how he has had an impact on the game in the state.
I mean, I haven't heard his name quite that often recently when we talk about like Texas water polo and the history of it. And for me, obviously it's my personal experience, but like for me, like he's been around for a long time, and he was primarily a swimming guy also. But he developed and maintained that program at Side Creek for a really long time before Sherrar went there, and then before Chandler obviously is there now. So, and then after he retired, he got heavily into officiating and was really responsible for, from my perspective at least, for growing the Officials Association into what it is now. And I know that a lot of changes have been made in the past couple of years, and they were necessary and things, and we still need more, and it still needs to be better. But he's really good at like getting new people in and like kind of holding their hand through the process. So I don't know, he's just dedicated a lot of time and energy to the sport, both coaching and, officiating. And, I think he deserves a little pat on the back for that. So, and he's, like I said, he was always super encouraging to us, and allowing us to develop into players and pushing us to be better. So I appreciate that about him.
He was the one who apparently pushed you toward Iona in particular, or at least, or you tell me, like, was he just simply open-minded about you going to play collegiate water polo somewhere? I'm curious because there's something of a little pipeline between Texas and Iona, and I don't really understand it.
Yeah, so he really wanted me to just go play, and he wasn't picky about where. When I started looking at Iona, this is a little kind of funny actually. Jocelyn, her name Vincent now, but Jocelyn Chapman, who graduated the year before and played at St. Agnes. St. Agnes was like our bitter rival in high school. It was Side Creek and St. Agnes for my latter years in high school, and they were our mortal enemies, And so when Jocelyn ended up going to Iona. She graduated, like I said, the year before me. And so I went on my recruiting trip. I was like, well, if this place is good enough for Jocelyn, it must be good enough for, because she's spectaqular. She's a great athlete, really great water polo player. So I'm like, man, this must be a good school if she chose to go here, So she was quite honestly part of the reason. And then I went on my recruiting trip, and Brian Kelley, the coach, said, okay, I'm going to go drop you off with Jocelyn. And I was like, oh, no, we're not friends. I mean, that's going to be awkward. Like, we're not friends. And then, of course, she became one of my greatest friends, and is the reason that I'm at St. Agnes now. So, it came kind of full circle. But she's not the reason that I went to Iona, but that I think, and there was a girl before her that came from Texas as well that went and swam in Iona. So that pipeline sort of, I think, developed way back when. So. Sorry, I'm seeing a phone.
That's all right. You just snuck in something. So you said that she was the reason you're at St. Agnes. Tell us more about that.
She is, yeah. So when I graduated college, I moved back home. I started working in a completely different field. I didn't intend to go into teaching and coaching. She did. She went and got, she taught science and at St. Agnes, but before that, she was the swimming and water polo coach at St. Agnes. She took that job, and when she decided that she was ready to move out of coaching, she got married and started a family, and it just became, time for her to move on. She basically forced me into applying for the position. She told me that if I didn't do it, that she would do it for me. And she was really adamant about making sure that when she left the team, she felt comfortable with whose hands she was leaving it in. And we were great friends, obviously, at this point. So I applied for the job, and that's how I ended up at St. Agnes, and switched my loyalties from Side Creek to St. Agnes. And
you must be torn about that.
I got a little flack from some people, I'm not going to lie. So, but yeah, it was never a place I saw myself being, but that's how I ended up here, and I haven't looked back, and I love it. So.
And what year was that your first year at St. Agnes?
2010.
Okay, so 2010. Let's go back to Iona a bit, because it's a curious place. Oh, it's funny. I don't like inserting. Well, I kind of like inserting my own story. We're trying to look for colleges for my daughter, who's 16 right now, and I was like, why not Iona? And they were like, well, why? And I said, well, because they're one of the only schools that recruited me. So it's like I did not get a lot of good looks, by colleges, but they were interested in having me.
And for a Southern Californian, that place is as exotic as it could possibly be. Like there was zero chance I was going there, zero. So anyway, but you obviously had success there, and you were at least recruited by Brian Kelley, who's been there for dog's years. Wow, he's been there for a long time. Tell us maybe a couple of your greatest memories on one of those teams, and then, but also maybe share a little bit about Brian Kelley himself, because again, he's a name that's been around water polo for a long time. He's a Chicago guy, but I'm not sure people really know about him all that much.
Yeah, he started the women's program at Iona, so as long as there's been a women's program, he's been there. It was fairly new when I went. It was only in its 4th or 5th year, I think. So I knew, you know, when I went that I could be potentially like an impact player for the team, and that was something that really appealed to me. So yeah, I mean, I actually also went on alumni weekend on my recruiting trip, and that really kind of hooked me in too, because really the Iona water polo team has a pretty big alumni presence. It's kind of like a family. So I think that's one thing that Brian does well, is maintains that kind of alumni involvement with the team, which is important in a smaller school that doesn't have gigantic budgets and things like that. So yeah, but that was kind of how I ended up there. Brian, yeah, like you said, has been around for a long time. He is a Chicago guy, so I think he played at Iona as well. He played for the men's team, so he stuck around and got that job, and then has been there ever since. But yeah, he recruited heavily from Chicago, and then kind of branched out into Texas. Still does. He's got a couple of Texas girls and boys there now, and is looking at more. So I think he, like I said, relies on that alumni network, especially those of us that are coaching, to kind of branch out and offer, you know, a bridge, so to speak, between Iona and our athletes. So
I think it's not unusual at all for an athlete to leave his or her high school and then go on to college and realize, oh, this coach is completely different than the one that I had before. The tactics they teach are different. The techniques they teach are different. So maybe highlight a couple of those things when you showed up and you're like, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, Coach Webb or John Webb and Brian Kelley are very different. I mean, we definitely got yelled at like every once in a while by John Webb, you know, when we were not focused and things like that. But the tone is a little different when you get to college. You know, obviously the competition is a little bit different. The expectations are different. So that was not necessarily a shock, but it was something to get used to, right? Is the way that maybe your coach communicates with you in college. It's a little more direct, I would say. So, you know, there's that. And then, yeah, like just learning like actual plays, going from high school where, you know, we had a solid team, but we didn't have, you know, a team where we were like running plays and things. So the first time I got a playbook, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this is okay. We're going to do this. So, you know, that was a new, definitely a new thing for me. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. It's definitely just a different level, but you get exposed to more competition. We were able to travel and play some big name schools, which was really fun. It's always fun to get your butt kicked by future Olympians, you know?
Right, it is.
So, yeah, so had a good time.
When did you realize you were good?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. That's a hard question for me.
You do understand that you were good, right? Like you're not okay. You're not so modest as to say that, oh no, you're not in any.
Oh yeah, I definitely experienced some success. I think probably in high school, like, okay, I can tell you this. We were, I can't remember if it was my freshman or my sophomore year, but we were at the state championship tournament. We were going to the championship game, and we were at, you know, a hotel, and we probably weren't in our rooms when we were supposed to be in our rooms, and they were doing room checks, and our assistant coach came and found me and, you know, some of my friends. We were in our rooms, and she was yelling at us all the way down the hallway and turned around, pointed her finger at me and said, "You're starting in the state championship game tomorrow." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm starting?" And the what? And she's like, "Yeah," and, you know, yelled at me. And I thought, oh, okay. Like, I think that was my freshman year. So I felt like, oh, like it was the first time anybody had held me accountable for something that, you know, for my potential, I guess. So probably maybe then, and then it just kind of pushed me to continue exploring that potential, I guess.
And you said you had your doubts about playing collegiate water polo. So you show up at Iona, and I'm for those of us who've actually done this, it can be really intimidating. I'm wondering if you felt intimidated. And then again, when did you sort of figure out, I can actually do this, and not only do it, but do it well?
Yeah, I was definitely intimidated. I was in the mindset that there was no way I could play like in California. I just for some reason have that in my brain. Sometimes I think about that going back. I think I ended up at the right place, but looking back on it, I'm like, would have been fun to try, So I always encourage my girls now, there are no boundaries, cast the net wide and you'll figure out where you're supposed to be. But so yeah, at Iona, our first game that we played was a super competitive game. We played against Hartwick, and that was like one of our big rivals. They were a really strong program. They lost their program recently, which is a bummer. But, Brian held me back in the van before the game after we were going in. He, was like giving me this pep talk about how I need to like play really hard and get really intense at the very beginning. And I was like, yeah, I got this. And I got excluded in like the first 30 seconds of the game. And he was like, yeah, not like that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, I didn't do anything like overly aggressive, but I was just,
yeah, sure.
Just being a little overzealous maybe in the very beginning. So, and it was a really competitive game, but we lost. And I remember being like kind of heartbroken. I hadn't lost a game in a while, but I was like heartbroken by that loss, and it sort of like motivated me. But and then there was we played against Wagner in one of the next games, and they had these pair of twins that were over 6 feet tall and big girls, and it was the first time that I'd ever been like out muscled, and that was a big shock to me. I was like, oh, okay, there are people that are stronger than me, and I'm going to have to not rely on just that like size and muscle and actually develop some skill here. So that was a big thing in college, as well as just like skill development and realizing that there's always somebody faster and stronger and smarter than you in the pool, and it is your job to figure out how to work or play against them, essentially. So
right.
Okay, our typical end of show wrap up. We've got a couple other things. I wanted to make mention of one thing before we go into a little scheduling. I know these guys at All Access Water Polo. I don't know them well. I've spoken to them once on the phone. In fact, I tried to recruit them, but they wanted to do their own thing. Fair enough. They had a conversation with Alec Rolsa. I think it came out on Monday. I'm not sure. Maybe the day before. That's a conversation worth listening to. Like, he's a very good talker. Like, he is very interesting. He knows his stuff. He's got a very unique perspective. He grew up in Europe, in the Netherlands, came up through that, that kind of water polo programming, and then it had tremendous success at UCLA, 3 national championships, and then made the 2016 Olympic team. So they go over a bunch of territory that he's really interesting. So anyway, I commend that to people to listen to after they listen to this podcast. But yes, go listen to that one. What else is on the calendar coming up for us in Texas?
For this week, we have our Southwest Zone Town Hall meeting. It's about Masters Water Polo. That's again on Tuesday, July 21st at 6:30 p.m. So if you did not get a chance to watch that, please go back and watch it at TXWaterpolo.com. And on Thursday, July 23rd at 12:30 p.m., we have Coach Ty Halfer from Clear Creek High School in Southeast Houston, who is going to be talking about, kind of running a successful UIL high school program. Once we start in fall 2020, kind of his plan of attack, from recruiting athletes to taking advantage of the strength and conditioning and the sport specific training that the UIL allows teams to have kind of during the summer, and also the restrictions that are going to come with. You coach high school water polo in the UIL, you're going to be restricted from coaching your athletes outside your season to a certain extent.
That is a show that I will watch. Like that, just because I'm fascinated by that. Just the switch from essentially being a club program to something that's more sanctioned by the state. It has its, it has its requirements. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. All right. Well, Joe, you're done moving, but thank you for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, wear your mask, people.
All right, thanks again to Kaitlin Kelley, I hope, for taking the time to talk with us. Thank you for listening and telling a friend about the TX Waterpolo Podcast. And special thanks to our fabulous donors who keep us afloat. And if you want to contribute, go to txwaterpolo.com/give. Until next week, so long from Austin.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.